Hi, I'm David Dingo for Dingo Servo Mounts, and today we're going to be looking at the new Low Profile MK2. This is a development of the popular Low Profile mount. Just has a few little extras like an extra switch and stuff like that, which will make it a little bit more attractive. There is no difference in terms of the size, there's no difference in terms of the positioning of the pins, etc. So if you've already got low profiles in, you would be able to swap them with these if you so desired. Now, I'm not going to take you through what the mount can do because that is quite very much the same as the low profile mount. What I'm going to do is show you how to put this mount together. So first of all, you need to get a hold of the packet and take out all the bits and pieces and get your trusty bending block, and then we'll start. First thing we need to do is to take the frame. I'm just going to back this off a bit. There we go. First thing I'm going to do is take the frame and we put it with the footplate fold exactly on the edge of the block and hold it down very firmly with the left hand and push it over with the right hand. Once you've bent it, you will notice that the bend is not 100% 90 degrees, so just a little tweak like that should get it to 90 degrees. Just a tad more, I think. There we go. Once you've got it in that position, then you need to turn the mount over, so this footplate is now standing up, and then bend the two wings down the opposite direction. Now, when we bend these down, they won't go completely closed, which is exactly what we want to do. We don't want them completely closed at this stage because we want to slide the slider into that. Also worth saying that aluminium is a funny material. It bends quite easily, but it doesn't like going backwards and forwards. So if you bend it the wrong way, you pretty much had it, and you maybe need to order a new one and start again. So be careful, read through the documentation, make sure you bend it once and you bend it correctly. So we've got a right angle bend there, and we've got two bends there which are not quite right angles, which we'll fix up later on. The next thing we need to do is we need to bend the slider. Now the slider has to be bent in a particular way, particularly if you are going to use it as a carrier for our underboard tie bar kits, because they only fit in one particular direction. So the best thing to do is to take it like this, make sure that long slot is away from you, and this is the bit that we're going to be bending down. So the long slot away from you and this bit bending down, and we push that all the way down, and we can just tick that one up until it is at 90 degrees. There we go. And that is the slider done and dusted. So we've got the two parts ready to go. The next thing you need to do if you are going to fit switches is to use the M2x10 screws and fit the switches to the bottom, as you can see here. There are the nut plates at the back, those are the screws, and the switch lever points to the bottom of the mount. That's always referred to as the top of the mount because that goes under the baseboard. This is the bottom of the mount, so they face towards the bottom. That is how you mount the switches. If you're not mounting switches, or if you're only mounting one switch, it's entirely up to you, but that's the way they go. If you are double stacking, you can only double stack on the left hand side, and for that you will need our long screw pack, which gives you the longer screws to fit into, to hold two screws. Unfortunately, you can't double stack this right hand side because of the servo horn, which would crash with the top switch. The next thing to do is to take our slider and insert the three M2 by 3mm screws. And these are difficult little things to work with, but if you hold them onto the end of the screwdriver like that, a little posi drive screwdriver, and they go in quite easily. Now I'm going to put all 3 screws in. If, I've done those 2, if now you're going to use the mount in a standard way, in other words underneath the baseboard, then you would use the screws in that position. I'll put an extra screw in that hole. If you were going to use this as a pull unit, in other words mounting on top of the layout, then you would put the extra screw in that hole over there. You could also dog leg this, so that if you had a piece of timber or something in the way here, you could actually move the mount to one side, have a dog leg coming up into the tie bar. For this particular case, I'm going to use the normal position. In other words, I'll put the 3 screws in for a vertical plant. Now, at some stage we can put that in position. It will run between the 3 screws, and we would then lock up the middle screw first and then the 2 other screws. I'm not going to put it in at the moment, I'm just going to leave it out for the moment. The next thing we have to do is to put our servo motor into the mount. Now, in order to start from the right place, I always suggest centering the servos first. Now, these little blue things have a way you can move the thing from one side to the other. You could just sort of work out which is the midpoint of the knob, and so that's pretty much the center. Or alternatively, with this little one, you have a mode switch here. If you press the mode switch once, the center light comes on and it is then in the center point. I've already fitted the horn because I've already centered this particular one, but obviously, and if you haven't centered it, you would first move it into central position and then fit the horn. So now the next thing is to mount this into the mount, into the frame. Now, the most important thing with this is to mount the motor with the drive or the spindle on the right hand side. It must be that way around, otherwise the mount's not going to work. So that to the right, the servo is centered, the arm is standing vertically downwards, and in that position we can turn it over and then fit the 2 M2x6 screws into the back. They will tap into the frame. Make sure you don't put too much force on and strip the threads, because they're only aluminium and they will take considerable amount of force. If for some reason you do happen to strip the threads, then what you can do is put an M2 nut on the inside and then just tighten it up with that. But there's no M2 nuts in the pack. So that is the main frame made up, with its switches on, servo in, servo centered. The next thing then is to take the, this is where it gets a bit tricky, the slider, sliding one side first and then across and into the other side. Here we go, and then we can just pinch these a little bit so that they are in the center. And that should slide fairly nicely and go from side to side and operate the 2 switches. As a matter of interest, make sure the switches are on the extreme outside positions of the movement, because that way you will get, you won't have a foul up when you start switching on the unit. It gives it the most travel available. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but in the servo arm there are a series of holes. Now we have a little drive screw, which is this little screw here, and that needs to screw into one of those holes. The further away from the center you move it, the bigger the swing will be. The closer to the center pardon me, the servo, the shorter the swing will be. I like to start this one in the top hole, the one closest to the spindle. Now this is a little bit of a cow to get in, but with a little bit of concerted effort it will go in quite happily. Screw it in about halfway. Make sure when you look through the back that the screw is not fouling against the motor itself. I can go in another half a turn. This is actually the weak point of the servo, so if anything does break, that would be the screw that would break, and that's there for a reason. Right, now we can put our pin in there and tighten up the center screw, then the other two screws. For the time being, just finger tight's fine. And once again, we will then put the servo onto the servo tester in the normal mode, and then we can check that everything moves correctly. This can now be fixed to the baseboard or through the baseboard from the bottom. The pin, by the way, is exactly in the center of these two holes, just offset by that amount, but it's exactly in the center. Unlike the Micro 10 and the Micro 8s, you don't need a drill jig for this one. It's quite easy just to measure that distance and put it into that position. Put it up through the baseboard, screw it on, set your end stops. Once you've got your end stops set with your software, you can then slacken off these switches. Just move them in slightly until they just operate, and lock them up again. Now every time the servo comes to that point, it will operate the switch. Same on the other side. Once that's all done, you're good to go. You can then adjust these screws slightly and bring your pin down to wherever it needs to be. You can slide that down so it just comes through your tie bar, doesn't foul anything, and then lock it up, because once it's in position, the pin will always move completely linearly, so it's not going to go up and down, so you don't have to worry about, oh, will it drop out this side, drop out that side. It will always move absolutely linearly. So once you've got the height right, wherever you set it up, it will be the same across the turnout. And that, as I say in the classics, is the new Micro 10. The new Low Profile. The new Low Profile Mark II. Thank you for watching.